Imagine walking into a home where time seems frozen. A half-eaten meal on the table, clothes folded neatly on the bed, phones left charging, but the family that lived here is gone. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just emptiness. This is the true story of the family that left everything behind and vanished without a trace. It started with concern. The neighbors hadn't seen the Miller family in days. Their car was still in the driveway, their dog was barking non-stop. Something didn't feel right. When they stepped inside, they found a home untouched, as if the Millers had planned to return at any moment. But they never did. Keys on the counter, wallets untouched, even the TV was still on, playing a late-night show. It was as if they had stepped out and simply never came back. Authorities launched an immediate investigation. No signs of forced entry, no security footage showing them leaving, no credit card activity. It was as if the entire family had been erased from existence. Their car remained in the driveway untouched, but inside, one discovery made the case even stranger. A note, hastily written, just 6 words: "We had no choice. Forgive us." What did it mean? Who were they asking forgiveness from, and why did they leave without taking anything? The case quickly became a national sensation. Speculation ran wild. Some believed the Millers were running from something, or someone. Some theorized that they had been part of something dangerous, a witness to a crime, a target of someone powerful. Others whispered darker theories, that they had discovered something they shouldn't have, or had fallen victim to something beyond human comprehension. But one theory stood out, a hidden piece of evidence that had gone unnoticed. In the voicemail, his voice trembles. He says just one sentence before the call cuts off: "They're already here." To this day, the Miller family has never been found. Their home was left untouched, their belongings still in place, gathering dust. Every attempt to trace their movements has led to dead ends. It's as if they never existed. But one unsettling detail remains. In the last photo ever taken of them, standing just beyond the frame, barely visible, is a shadow, a shape, a figure. What really happened to the Miller family? Did they run? Were they taken? Or did something unimaginable come for them? Gap 1S. To understand the disappearance of the Miller family, we need to delve deeper into their lives. The Millers were a seemingly ordinary family. John, a local businessman, Sarah, a dedicated schoolteacher, and their 2 children, Emma and Luke, both excelling in their studies and extracurricular activities. They were well-liked in their community, often seen participating in local events and charity drives. Gap 2S. But beneath the surface there were whispers of financial troubles. John's business had been struggling for months, and there were rumors of unpaid debts. Could the mounting pressure have driven them to stage their disappearance? Or perhaps they were fleeing from someone they owed money to? Gap 2S. Then there's Sarah. Colleagues mentioned she had become increasingly distant in the months leading up to their disappearance. Some speculated she might have been dealing with personal issues, possibly even contemplating leaving her husband. Did she orchestrate a plan to escape her life? Gap 2S. And what about the children? Emma's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She became more withdrawn, less engaged. Luke too had been acting out, getting into trouble at school. Were these signs of a family in crisis, or were they clues to a more sinister plot? Gap 2S. Each member of the Miller family had their own secrets, their own struggles. But were these enough to make them vanish without a trace? Or is there an even darker truth lurking in the shadows? Gap 2S. Theories abound, but without concrete evidence, we can only speculate. What really happened to the Miller family remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of our time. And as we search for answers, we must consider every possibility, no matter how improbable. Gap 2S. Stay with us as we continue to unravel the enigma of the Miller family. Could the key to their disappearance lie in their hidden past, or is the truth even more elusive than we imagine? Gap 1S. While official investigations have provided limited answers, the community surrounding the Millers offers its own perspectives. Gap 1S. We spoke with neighbors, friends, and family members to gather their insights and theories on what might have happened to this seemingly ordinary family. Gap 1S. Neighbor's voice. They were always so friendly. John would help me with my garden and Sarah always had a smile on her face. Gap 1S. But I did notice John seemed stressed lately, always on the phone, arguing with someone. Gap 2S. Friend's voice. Emma and I were really close. Gap 2S. She started pulling away a few months before they vanished. Gap 2S. She wouldn't talk about it, but I could tell something was wrong. Gap 2S. She seemed scared. Gap 2S. Family member's voice. We tried to help them with their financial issues. Gap 2S. But John was too proud to accept. Gap 2S. Sarah confided in me once that she felt trapped. Gap 2S. She didn't say much, but I could see it in her eyes. Gap 2S. Neighbor's voice. There was that one night. Gap 2S. I heard shouting coming from their house. Gap 2S. It was around midnight. Gap 2S. I thought it was just a typical family argument, but now, I wonder if it was something more. Gap 2S. These voices paint a picture of a family under immense pressure. Gap 2S. Dealing with issues far beyond what was visible to the outside world. Gap 1S. Some believe the Millers may have staged their disappearance to escape their troubles. Gap 1S. Others fear a more sinister fate. Gap 1S. Friend's voice. I don't think they would just leave without telling anyone. Gap 1S. Something must have happened to them. Gap 1S. Something bad. Gap 2S. Family member's voice. We just want answers. Gap 2S. It's the not knowing that's the hardest part. Gap 2S. Every day we hope for a sign, a clue, anything that could bring them back to us. Gap 2S. As the mystery deepens, the community remains united in their quest for the truth. Gap 1S. Will these personal accounts help uncover what really happened to the Miller family? Gap 1S. Or will they only add more layers to an already complex enigma? Gap 2S. Stay with us as we continue to explore every angle, every possibility in our search for answers. Gap 2S. The story of the Millers is far from over, and your support is crucial in helping us piece together this puzzle. Gap 2S. Now let's move on to our conclusion. Gap 2S. The Miller family's disappearance is not an isolated incident. Gap 1S. Throughout history, there have been numerous cases of families vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only questions and heartache. Gap 2S. Let's delve into some of these similar cases and explore any potential connections. Gap 2S. In 1996, the Johnson family from Devon disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Gap 1S. Neighbors reported seeing them the night before, but by morning they were gone. Gap 1S. Personal belongings left behind and no signs of a struggle. Gap 2S. The investigation yielded few clues, and to this day their fate remains unknown. Gap 2S. Another case from 2003 saw the disappearance of the Clark family in Yorkshire. Gap 1S. Friends mentioned financial troubles and a string of heated arguments in the months leading up to their disappearance. Gap 1S. Sound familiar? Gap 2S. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the Clarks was ever found. Gap 2S. What links these cases to the Millers? Gap 1S. Is there a pattern, a common thread that binds these families together? Gap 2S. Some theorists suggest the involvement of a clandestine organization preying on vulnerable families. Gap 2S. Others believe it could be a case of group abduction or even voluntary disappearances orchestrated to escape insurmountable pressures. Gap 2S. While these theories remain speculative, the similarities cannot be ignored. Gap 1S. Each family faced mounting pressures, secretive behavior, and a sudden, unexplained disappearance. Gap 2S. Could understanding these patterns help us uncover the truth behind the Miller family's fate? Gap 2S. As we continue to investigate, we urge you to share any information or insights you might have. Gap 1S. Your tips could be the missing piece in this perplexing puzzle. Gap 2S. Together, we can bring light to these dark mysteries and perhaps find answers for the families left behind. Gap 2S. Now let's move on to our conclusion. Gap 2S. To shed more light on the Miller family's mysterious disappearance, we turn to the experts. Gap 2S. Criminologists, psychologists, and even paranormal investigators have weighed in on this baffling case. Gap 2S. Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned criminologist, suggests that the pattern of these disappearances could indicate a sophisticated criminal network. Gap 2S. The lack of evidence at the scene, she explains, points to a highly organized operation, likely involving multiple individuals. Gap 2S. However, Dr. Mark Simmons, a clinical psychologist, offers a different perspective. Gap 1S. He believes the stress and pressures faced by these families could lead to voluntary disappearances. Gap 2S. It's possible, he notes, that the Millers felt there was no other way out. The mounting financial and social pressures might have driven them to orchestrate their own disappearance. Gap 2S. But not all theories are grounded in the rationale. Gap 1S. Paranormal investigator Sarah Blackwood brings a more mysterious angle to the discussion. Gap 2S. There have been reports of strange occurrences in the Millers' neighborhood, she says. Gap 1S. Unexplained lights, eerie sounds, and even sightings of shadowy figures. Could this be a case of supernatural intervention? Gap 2S. While these theories span a wide spectrum, they all underscore the complexity of the Miller family's case. Gap 2S. Each expert brings a unique lens, but the truth remains elusive. Gap 2S. As we piece together these insights, one thing is clear: we must remain open to all possibilities. Gap 2S. Now let's move on to our conclusion. Gap 2S. As we come to the end of our investigation, let's take a moment to summarize the key points of this perplexing mystery. Gap 2S. The Miller family's sudden disappearance has left a deep void, filled with unanswered questions and countless theories. Gap 2S. From the initial discovery of their abandoned home to the intricate investigation that followed, each step has revealed more layers of complexity. Gap 2S. We've delved into their background, uncovering potential motives that range from financial struggles to interpersonal conflicts. Gap 2S. The community's voices have provided a tapestry of perspectives, each adding a piece to this enigmatic puzzle. Gap 2S. We've also explored similar cases, drawing potential connections that hint at a broader, more sinister pattern. Gap 2S. Expert opinions have offered diverse viewpoints, from organized crime to voluntary disappearance, and even the possibility of supernatural involvement. Gap 2S. Yet, despite all these insights, the Miller family's fate remains shrouded in mystery. Gap 2S. This case serves as a stark reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life can be. Gap 2S. It challenges us to question the nature of reality and the hidden forces that may influence our lives. Gap 2S. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the importance of community, the need for vigilance, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Gap 2S. The Miller family may be gone, but their story continues to resonate, urging us to look deeper and never settle for easy answers. Gap 2S. Now let's move on to our conclusion. Their house still stands, a time capsule of a family that should be there, but isn't. No answers, no explanations, only a chilling silence. And the question remains, will they ever be found? Some families leave for a new life. Some disappear without a reason, and some never really leave at all. Subscribe for more chilling mysteries.